Welcome to the Game Changer podcast, where we dive deep into those real stories, struggles, and successes that shape that youth sport journey. Now, today's guest is Erik Panzer, founder of Panzer Performance, and someone whose sporting story might just be a little more relatable and certainly more relevant than, I guess, those highlight reel dreams that many of us hold for our kids. Erik didn't become a global superstar, he didn't sign a mega contract, but what he did do and what he has done is to use sport as a launchpad for adventure, for learning, for growth, and for a purpose-driven career. His journey is a brilliant reminder that sport's not just a path to the pros, it can be a lifelong passport to new places, new people, and new possibilities. Look, if you are a parent hoping to help your child achieve their potential and build a rich, full life, no matter where they end up in their sport, Erik's sport story is one you'll want to hear. Let's get into it. Erik Panzer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome. Hey, look, mate, we always start the show off with the same two questions. We are the Game Changer podcast. What do those words game changer mean to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think in terms of like a journey or life, it's something that impacts the trajectory or the path that you're on. So it could be a person, it could be an event or a moment. So it's something that impacts that kind of journey, enlightens that journey as such, and potentially changes your direction as such. So yeah, that's how I would kind of see or use the word game changers as something that's kind of impacted your trajectory or your path that you're on.
Yeah, I like that. I like that word enlightened.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're brought up, you're brought up in a certain environment with specific people, but often it's that moment or that person who steps into that environment and makes you enlightened to seeing something a slightly different way and changes your path. Yeah, that's cool. So if you look at that and you look at that word game changer, have there been game changing people or moments that have impacted your journey?
Yeah, there's plenty of moments, and I actually was fortunate enough to reflect on. I did a podcast called Relatable Chapters a couple of years ago, and they picked at 6 different key chapters in your life, sort of thing. So I've recently reflected on different key moments or game-changing moments for me as such. And there's a few, if I wind all the way back to when I was 10 or 11, maybe 12, I was an angry tennis player. And my parents kind of invested in some mental skills or psych support for me to manage that anger. And so fast forward to where I am now, 20 odd years later, that was a game-changing moment because I'm now in a field of that or similar like kind of work. And then when I was in high school, I was very fortunate for a teacher aide who randomly just mentioned to me in passing comment one day to apply for a school leaders scholarship to Outward Bound. And so that was when I was in year 12 going into year 13. And when I look at all the different game-changing moments that I've had, this one kind of stands out the biggest. More so because of who I became. I think it's made me the person that I am today. It's developed that character. It was the first time I got to kind of reflect upon myself, and high school wasn't easy for me. And I got to go to Outward Bound and be around a bunch of other individuals navigating life, and you get put through the ringer, and it was you talk about enlightening. It was an experience where I gained a lot, and it kind of developed me into the person that I am today. And then like the character that I've taken from that has kind of stayed with me all throughout. And then of course there's other moments in the journey. There's different people that come into it and give you opportunities that lead to other opportunities. And I'm a big believer in everything that you've done leads you to exactly where you are. And so if it weren't for one person, it wouldn't be for another person, and then that like the flow on effect, right? And so if I was to try and just name one person, like it's really hard to just name one person. But in terms of who I've become and who I am now, the biggest moment was going on that school leaders course at Outward Bound.
It's really interesting. And do you think you would have gone on that course if it wasn't for that teacher aid?
I would not have known about it. Like obviously they probably did some marketing through the school system and stuff like that, but I didn't see the poster, I didn't see anything. And so thankfully, yeah, the teacher just made mention of it, um, and it's led me to exactly where I am.
Oh, sliding doors moment, isn't it? Like, someone who sees something in you didn't have to share anything, but a few simple words and can have a massive impact on your life.
Totally.
I want to circle back to this angry 12-year-old tennis player.
Absolutely.
Why were you an angry player? Was it to do with the competition or can handle losing? What was going on for this 12-year-old Erik?
Oh, there was probably a lot of pressure, individual sport. Um, I was pretty good, and I wouldn't say like I probably put the pressure on myself, or the environment put the pressure on me. I wouldn't say my parents or anyone like that put the pressure on me. Um, but yeah, I was John McEnroe style, breaking rackets and yelling and cussing, and I was a bit of an embarrassment to be honest, on some occasions. And I guess it was because I was so frustrated that I couldn't do what I felt like I could do, sort of thing.
Yep.
And I let little things like eat away at me, sort of thing, and it would build up point by point. So yeah, it was really interesting to then get some support and just understand a little bit more about how the brain works and what's going on, and trying to calm me down and get some skills in that sense. Um, but yeah, I retired from the age of tennis at 13 years old.
How lucky though to have parents who could see that you needed that help, but then would take the step to do that. Um, was that like obviously you retired from tennis at 13? Um, were you still angry then, or had that sort of stopped?
So the person I worked with um, thought I would stay in individual sports, and thought
Right.
I'd become like a triathlete or something like that, which is quite entertaining. But um, I think once I was in a team environment, it just changed like the thought of pressure potentially, and I was able just to focus on what I had to do, and then there was so many other elements to the performance for like victory or for loss, sort of thing. Whereas in tennis, I was responsible for everything.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If I lost, it was all my fault. And if I so there's potentially like this displacement of responsibility, whether I knew it or not, at that age, at 13, in being part of a team sport. And I played a bunch of sports as a teenager, and I was decent at a lot of them. But most of them, or all of them, were kind of team sports, except for tennis and cross country. Um, and so having more people around meant that I just had to focus on what I needed to do, and it wasn't the end of the world if I didn't like if I wasn't perfect. But in
Yep.
tennis, if I wasn't perfect, or like if I wasn't playing up to the ability that I thought I was playing up to, then that's what probably got me angry. I knew when the opposition was better than me, but I just when it was someone that I felt like I could win, I just
Yep.
couldn't
Yep.
sort it out.
Interesting. But they obviously gave you some tools to work with, and that helped.
Yeah, it definitely did help. Maybe not immediately as such, because I ended up moving away from tennis within a year or so. But yeah, I'd take some of those skills into like later in high school. But that person that I worked with when I was 12 or 13, I reached, and this is jumping ahead in my journey, but I reached out to them when I was 24.
Okay.
And that was a very key moment because I was much more mature and they gave me a few things to do then. And that changed my trajectory once again. So that was less performance, but more personal identity stuff when I was 24. Whereas when I was 12 or 13, it was just I was learning breathing techniques to stay calm or to just try and
Yep.
like calm my system and everything and have like a circuit breaker between points so that I wasn't caught up on the point just before. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but there's different things in that I did carry through. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Like we often talk about when you're raising a youth athlete that sometimes it can be really powerful for them to be in a team sport and an individual sport because you get different things from those sports, don't you? Those different moments help build character or they bring out moments that show your character that might need some work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the power of accountability and responsibility is huge, whether it's team or individual. And maybe I like at different points in my journey, I became too laxed on that within the team environment with football, and that may be why I didn't quite go as high or as far as I wanted to,
Mm,
because I didn't take full responsibility for what I needed to do.
that's
But
interesting.
absolutely having that balance of like skill learning as in an individual sport of like where does responsibility lie? What do you have to do? What's in your control and what's in your power? And then how does that look differently in a team sport? And then how do you actually work with others and how to like so learning that the teamwork skills and all that. Yeah, there's so many benefits of both. I'd agree on that.
Yeah, for sure. Look, today's podcast is really looking on your journey, and we're going to delve into how you used football as your sport to open up so many doors and have so many different experiences. But I want to go back to the start. And you've already mentioned this angry boy who's tennis, but who were you as a young kid? How did sport fit into your life, and what were some of your dreams?
Yeah, I was a country boy. Grew up on 20 acres out in the countryside, out in Nelson, and just grew up around nature, mountains, rivers, beaches, like paddocks, everything like that. So, an outdoorsy kid, absolutely, a little bit free range as such. But once I got to high school, it was more structured with team sports, and it was long days because we lived 45 minutes out of town.
Yep.
Um, so, like, even just on that, you had to pack everything you needed for the day when you left at 6:30 in the morning because you weren't coming home until 9 p.m. at night. And it wasn't just, oh, I'll just shoot home and grab my gear for football. No, it was like so I had like three different piles laid out and everything. But
Great
yeah,
skills, though, in terms of learning to be an organized person.
totally.
Nothing better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like that discipline and organization, I put a lot down to those early days of look, like you have to be ready to go at this time and you have to have everything you need for four different things before school, school, after school one, after school two, and then you're coming home at 8:30, 9 o'clock sort of thing. So yeah, great skills to learn. But yeah, I was this just adventurous kid, I'd say. In primary, we did a lot of tramping as a family over the school holidays and got out in nature and things like that. But then high school, your weekends and your holidays were taken up by
Yep.
tournaments and sports and stuff. Volleyball, tennis, cricket, rugby, football, cross country, a lot of them. Yeah, all of those I played, and I
Anything
played
that was going.
played to a decent level at most of them as well.
Yep.
I went to a smaller school, and so the talent pool was lesser, and so if you were athletic, you could fit into a couple of different first 11s or first
Yep.
15s and whatnot. But yeah, they all offered different experiences, offered different skill sets. And so if you're talking about early specialization, which is a big topic in youth development, I was who knows what it would have looked like if I was early specialization. Um, Whereas I played all these other sports that had hand-eye coordination, that had tennis, which is an extension of you with a racket, all that. There were so many different things, and it kind of just shaped me into who I was. Football just stayed the longest with me, and it provided opportunities, right? And so when I learned that you could get a scholarship to the States and go to university in America and keep playing the sport that you love, I learned that about 14, 15 years old. And that was like, cool, like I'll do that. But then you talk about dreams and aspirations, right? There's a sheet still on my corkboard at home, and it's got like future professions or something like that that I've written down when I was in high school, and it had like PE teacher, it had professional athlete, I think it had sports psychologist. It had a few different things on there,
Yep.
but that wasn't like front of mind. That was just there. I'd written it down. Front of mind was like what was right in front of me without getting too far ahead, because I was like, there's steps to get to where I want to. So it
Yes.
was like, can I make the regional rep team? And living in Nelson, at least with football, um, if you wanted to go to a national tournament, you had to represent the mainland region, which was Nelson, Marlborough, and Christchurch.
Yep.
And I never got the opportunity to represent the mainland region until I was year 13 and I was 18 years old. And so I've seen all my other teammates that are my age that are playing first team football go off and play for mainland at the national tournament at U15, U16, but I didn't. So like that was what I was focused on, was what was right there. Like what did I need to do? And so yeah, I had these ideas of potentially professional football, but I knew I was far, far away from it.
Yep.
And so it was like what was in front of me that I needed to accomplish to get there. And so yeah, that's kind of how it went. And it wasn't until late in year 13 that I got an opportunity to play for Canterbury United in the under 19 National Youth League. And from there, that was, you talk about game changing moments. It was a coach who believed in me, selected me, and gave me the opportunity. And then from there, more opportunities came.
And so, how did that college opportunity come about? So you're year 13, but you've had this on your mind since you were 14 and 15.
Yeah,
Did you go chasing that, or did that come about from playing in Canterbury?
we went chasing it. So my mum was American, so I have an American passport, and midway through my year 13, or in the July holidays of year 13, I jumped on a plane and went to the States and went to these tryouts at three different universities,
Yep.
met with different university coaches, things like that, and tried to get myself in the shop window. Without, like, agencies weren't that big back then.
Yep.
There was one or two, and um, we kind of two birds, one stone. We went to the States, saw a bunch of my family. Mum got to see her brothers and sisters, and I got to play a bit of footy and put my name out there, sort of thing. And so we did that, but I came away from that trip sadly with only a walk-on offer.
Yep.
And so that is no scholarship. You're just a regular student, and you're getting the opportunity to train and potentially play with the team.
Yep.
Um, and so that wasn't ideal. Absolutely not. Come back from the States, and this was before I'd even been selected for Canterbury United.
Okay.
And so then the mainland Premier League season comes to an end. Canterbury United squads get named. I got invited to a trial, which was in Christchurch on like a Tuesday night. And it was one of those where it was like, cool, like I'm willing to fly down. If you guys can put me up, I'll fly down. Went down to the trial. They put me up, picked me up from the airport, things like that, and then flew back and went to school the next day, sort of thing, just for an opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And from that, I made a good enough impression at the trial, but had been watching me all season anyway, because the team I played for, we played in the mainland Premier League. Nelson Suburbs played in the
Yep.
mainland Premier League, so we were in Christchurch every second weekend anyway. But I wasn't paying for that one, and so he'd seen me all season, saw me at the trial, obviously liked me enough. I got selected in the under 19s team, and I was also one of five. So back in the old days, you had to have five under 19 players in the first team squad.
Yep.
So I was one of those five as well. I came down for one training, I think, one time, and then went back. And after that training, they did a like training during the week. They did a like put your names or put a name in for who you want to be captain. And these guys have only seen me twice. And I'm at home in Nelson, and I get a message from the coach, like, "Hey, the boys have selected you as captain." I'm like, I'm like, what? Like, I was so surprised. But then if you wind back to um, what had happened at Outward Bound
Yep.
and who I'd become and the character that I'd developed and the type of person that I wanted to be and the imprint that I left on people and how that came across in my football. So I'd been around these guys for 4 hours maximum, been competing with them and things like that. And when it came to writing a name on a sheet of paper on who they wanted to be their captain, I wasn't even there. And so that was a huge moment for me.
Yeah.
And then that kind of just opened everything up because that under 19s team, what I'd do would I'd leave school at lunchtime on a Thursday, drive down to Christchurch, train Thursday night, and study from Christchurch on Friday, play the game on Saturday wherever it was around the country, and then drive back on Sunday. So I
For
did
people
that.
for people who don't live in that area, that's a long drive.
Yeah, it's a 5 hour drive.
Yep.
Um, and so, yeah, once again, what you're willing to do, right, for
Yeah.
opportunities. And this is kind of just the start of what I was willing to do for opportunities.
Paying the
But
price.
yeah, and then that team, we somehow, I still don't know how, I sometimes never believe it, but we went on and won the National Youth League. Um, we came second in our pool, played the semi-final up at Auckland City. We had a 6 a.m. flight from Christchurch to Auckland on the game day. We ate McDonald's for lunch, and we beat them on penalties. And then the next week we're up playing Waitakere United in the final, and we've
You,
beaten them 2-1 in extra time.
you've just
And
killed every nutrition talk we're ever going to do on this podcast.
it was it was grilled chicken wraps. That was the
There you go.
healthiest thing we could get at the time within the budget that
Brilliant.
we had. But I remember the coach gave me his card and just said, "Take the boys and get whatever you can," sort of thing that was within health. So, but yeah, like we were just a hard-working bunch of kids from the
Yep.
South Island that were willing to like go against the grain and work hard for each other um, and we came out on top, and that kind of opened up doors for me. People were watching that semi-final and final. I'd never had this exposure because I'd never been to a national tournament because I'd never made the mainland team before. So this was the first time that people outside of Nelson and Christchurch were seeing me. This is the first time that under 17s or under 20 coaches were getting a look at me. And then that was when a US scholarship agency was there watching. So yeah,
It's really interesting. Like just sitting back here listening to it, I can just see these steps from angry 12-year-old tennis player who gets a few tools to work with, who goes to Outward Bound and learns these characteristics, and from here seems like you have a pretty good self identity of who you want to be. But from there, it seems like you're just getting little bits of feedback all the time. If I do this, I'm getting success. I'm getting a little bit more confidence. My peers, who are probably the most important person to me, are choosing me as captain. A little bit more success. And that sort of reinforces a lot of those characteristics. And then all those things like hard work and that come out, and the whole team's successful. And you can kind of, I don't know, sitting back here, see that this is just giving you a little boost again of what I'm doing is working the whole way along. Did it kind of feel like that a little bit?
yeah. I mean, it didn't feel like it was straightforward.
No, I bet.
It
Not
was,
after
it
those
was
5 hour journeys and everything.
yeah, it was ups and downs, and those
Yep.
journeys were before podcasts, so it was you're in your own thoughts, you listen to music the whole time, or sometimes it was actually sharing the journey with some of the girls on the Canterbury Pride team that were
Yep.
in Nelson. But yeah, it was little wins, absolutely. But for me, it was like that was the most exciting thing because it wasn't handed to me on a plate.
Yeah.
Like it was the most exciting thing for me to get named in that Canterbury United squad. Um, and even though it was halfway through year 13 and I was nearly done with high school when I was 18, and it was like not many, I'd seen players that I'd grown up training with and everything in Nelson. One went off to Scotland on a pro contract at 15, 16. Another one went down to Christchurch. Like you'd see different ones go, and you're like, well, when's my chance coming? But it was just keeping my head down and trusting that something would come, and even with that only getting the walk on offer, I kind of just accepted it and just kept on going. And then opportunities came up. And as you say, like, I think it's just like kind of a reflection of who I was becoming, was being able to trust that process and not try and jump the gun or get too far ahead, and
Yep.
know that like everything's happening in its own time and everything happens for a reason as such. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now I want to get to your college career, but I want to dive back into that moment where you get selected by your peers as captain. Can you reflect back in that moment from that trial that I think you said it was 4 hours of training and trial, as to what characteristics you actually showed them that they might have seen to choose you as captain?
Yeah, I mean, so there was different things that had happened. I'd been playing men's football for a couple of years. I've been playing for Nelson Suburbs in the mainland Premier League, which was the top league in the South Island. And so from 16 to 17, I was playing against men. So I'd probably developed a bit of a thick skin. Um, I would say my communication. I was playing centre back, so my
Yep.
communication was like I learned off some pretty good partners at the back there. Um, and so communication was probably a big thing. And if they trusted my communication, then they trust me,
Yep.
ideally, right? And if you're at the back and you have people in front of you that trust you, or you have people beside you that trust you, that's a big win. And so, yeah, the communication was probably a big piece. Just the experience side of it. I think a lot of them hadn't really been exposed to too much senior
Yep.
men's football yet, and so that played a big role. And I was in senior environments from 15 onwards, but I was just this little passive kid that was just I was scared most of the time, to be honest. I wouldn't open my mouth or anything like that.
Yep.
I would open my mouth to give information and things like that, but everything else I'd just be like, yep, whatever you say, like I'll do it. Like just don't snap my legs, please. Like and so I think all of that kind of shaped this. Like, I've seen how older people lead and communicate and things. I'd say the communication piece was a big one. It'd be really
Absolutely.
interesting
Yep.
to ask that coach as well. And I think I've had conversations, but they were a long time ago. I'm still very good friends with that coach who made that call. But then someone else that potentially voted for me is Francis de Vries. He was my partner at centre back for that team, so he might be able to comment on that one whenever you get a
Yeah,
hold of
we're
him.
talking to him soon, so I'm going to ask him.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because we talked with Katie Schofield, who is a New Zealand cyclist, a couple of weeks ago, and she almost had an identical kind of answer, and that she came through and she was cycling sort of 17, 18, 19 with people who were older than her and had high expectations and high standards, and without being a mentor per se that you'd sat down and said, will you be my mentor? They were mentors for her. And, if you're being pushed up into a higher level with adults and maybe you're feeling uncomfortable, you actually take a lot from those environments that you can then put back into when you go and play against your own age, can't you?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's those things that you don't, or things that they don't say or whatever, those behaviors that they just do because that's what they know they need to do, and how they carry themselves, and those types of things that play play a big role as well. And that's, as I got older, that was a big part of who I was as a player and kind of what I displayed for some of the young people. I led by example. A lot of the time, that was how I tried to lead was by example, and that's probably reflective of what I picked up when I was younger.
Yeah, you obviously had a few good old heads around that you could learn from.
Yeah, yeah. There was a few down in Nelson. Nelson wasn't a massive football mecca, but even I guess some of the coaches that we had, they were part of the old Nelson United that won the old National League back in
Yep.
the 80s or 90s. And so yeah, I had a lot of good people around that did support that.
Brilliant. So you had to head off to the States. Before I get into your football, what were the academics like? Like having to get in, was that tough for you, or had you been a good studier at school and done well enough that it wasn't too bad?
Yeah, well, if we wind back to my high school days, I was leaving the house at 6:30 in the morning, getting home at 9 p.m. at night. I wasn't doing homework.
No.
So I'm just ruining all these parents at the moment saying, so
The football players are loving it. The
I
16
would,
year olds are going, Mum, I don't have to study.
yeah, I would use my study blocks at school a lot. I would go to the library after school when if training wasn't till 5 or 6 and I wasn't going home, I would go to the library or I'd go to swimming or something like that. But like I was sitting in the library doing some study when I got the message about Canterbury United. So that kind of just reflects on, okay,
Yep.
yeah, I was doing the work. Um, I managed to get in. So back in those days, you had to do an SAT test,
Yep.
which I don't think is mandatory anymore, but it's still, you can do it and it will benefit your application.
Yep.
But then you just translate your scores to a GPA. And by the time I ended up using an agency to get over there. And they kind of translated just the scores that I needed and
Right.
in the core courses that the states required. And they kind of washed away a few of the other scores. And so I had a decent enough GPA. It wasn't flash. And what I talk to young athletes these days about when they are concerned about grades and things like that, I got achieved with merit in year 11. I got achieved in year 12 and year 13, but I was still able to get over there because I took the right courses that you needed
Yep.
to get academic eligibility, and I got decent enough scores in those papers. Now, am I saying that swings now? I highly doubt it. I think my SAT test helped a lot
Yep.
because you get the opportunity to speak in that, I think, or like or write, I should say. So you got to express yourself instead of just being in a structured test.
Yep. Ticking boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm much better at explaining myself and verbalizing and things like that than I am memorizing and ticking boxes and choosing the right multiple choice question. So yeah, there was an academic requirement to get over there. Of course, if you got higher academics, then you're a higher chance of getting academic scholarship as well as athletic scholarship.
Yep.
And for certain families and things like that, that can be more attractive. For sports teams in the States, if you can get academic scholarships, they'll love you because they don't have to give out a full athletic scholarship to you, and they can disperse that athletic scholarship up over more people, things like that. So yeah, when I do speak to people looking to go to the States, it's get your academics as good as they can be, and then have your athletics as good as can be as well, sort of thing, and you might be able to get both. But then once I was there, I had to maintain a certain GPA, and by year 3, I knew how to study, and so my GPA from when I started to when I ended, I finished off in a really good spot and actually made Dean's List 3 or 4 times. So yeah, quite proud of that side of it, absolutely. But I was also studying something I was interested in as well, which helps.
Oh, 100%. Once you know what you want to study, your whole world around that changes, right? When you have that desire to learn.
Yeah,
Um, so you make the shift to college, and I want to say it right. Is it Quinnipiac?
yeah, that's pretty close. I'll give you
Pretty
that.
close.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice. How do
yeah.
you say it? Uh,
Quinnipiac.
oh, there you go. And so, for our listeners, you're kind of a little bit above New York, in between New York and Boston, kind of.
Yeah, I'd say nearly bang smack in the middle. It's in Connecticut. 2 hour train to Boston, hour and 45-minute train to New York City. We were 10 minutes up the road from Yale, and so that's like a reference point for a lot of people.
Yep,
And so, yeah, beautiful spot.
love it. So you're playing college soccer, as they say over there. Well, we used to say it here. We're sort of transitioning to football, most of us. So how does this sort of shape your experience with sport and your future? These, what was it, 4 years?
Yeah, it's, most degrees in America are four.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it was a hell of an experience. I was ready for it by the time I was finished with high school and everything. I was grown up. I was excited for it. Um, but yeah, it's everything's bigger. Your facilities were incredible. Like the what we had available to us at university level, at college level, outweighs most or a lot of professional level in a lot of countries, sort of thing. So for me, I was taking that next step in a lot of ways, whether it was facilities, whether it was training, whether it was education. I was taking a few steps, and so it just opened up your eyes to what was out there. Training full time and with all the facilities, the coaches, the athletic training staff, the resources that we had available to us. That was a big piece of it. I hadn't experienced that in New Zealand, so it just took everything to the next level. But then, from an experience perspective, the connections I made is like incredible.
Yeah.
I have friends around the world from all these different countries. I've been to numerous weddings in the last 3 years from teammates. Like the connections I made from that was one of the biggest things. The learning that I did about myself was also huge as well.
Yeah.
The learning I did about life in general, and you go through ups and downs of all sorts of different things, and then just learning about the degree that I was studying as well. So it's a whole experience. Like it's not just I wasn't just there for football, and football was a big part of it, but I made sure to experience America with everything else that it had on offer. I'd go down to New York City once a semester and things like that, and go to concerts, go to sporting events, support your other teams at your university, get involved on campus, things like that. So it was it was a really awesome 4 years. My closest friends are the guys that I stood beside every day for 3 to 4 years, sort of thing. And yeah, it's something that I hold close to me, and that was another chapter in the journey as such. And you meet all sorts of different people there that then play a role in the next steps as well.
100%. And so the next steps for you are at, at the end of your 4 years, what's your mindset around where you want to go and what you want to do?
Yeah, so the my final year was a roller coaster. The first 3 years, so I came in as a freshman and I started straight from the get-go, which
Yep.
wasn't that didn't happen too often. I'll put it that
Especially
way.
as a walk on.
Oh no, this one I got the
Oh,
by
you
the
got the
time I
scholarship. Yeah,
finished, yeah. So because I used an agency, they helped me get scholarship to a
gotcha.
different university. So I did get scholarship. So there was a bit of weight on me,
Yep.
but I I put myself in position to be ready when I got there. And I performed once I got there, and so from freshman year, but once again playing in a men's team for 3 years prior, whereas most of the Americans had only played in youth and things like that. Um, Put me in good position. So I started from the get go, and which was great because that probably helped get me settled and helped me feel like I belonged and people respected me and everything. And first couple of years were really good. Third year it got a little bit shaky, and then the start of the fourth year I got dropped to the bench, which was unfamiliar for me. It was a challenge, but when I look back on it, it was very valuable. I had to fight for my spot. I remember you have a choice in that situation, and the choice is like, do you give up and just throw in the towel and blame everyone else and or whatnot, or do you just you dig your heels in and you keep going? And it took a little bit, but I dug my heels and I kept going, and I had the resilience to keep on keeping on, sort of thing. And I remember getting a couple text messages from my captain at the time, just being like, "Look, like the situation sucks, but your response is incredible. I don't know how you're doing it," sort of thing. And so like things like that just really meant a lot, and I just kept going and got the opportunity. And once I got my opportunity to play again, I just took it, and the rest of the season I played like with real quality. And so that gave me the hope and the confidence to attempt at continuing the journey after college. I hadn't really thought too clearly about it as such, what I was going to do. I hadn't really planned my academics around it.
Yeah.
If I had a clear idea that I was going to play, I should have graduated 6 months early and taken some papers in summers beforehand to graduate in December, so I'd be able to go and trial and take opportunities in January, February when the US window was open.
Yep.
So I hadn't, so yeah, I hadn't really prepared in that sense. So by the time I got to May of the year I graduated, it was just leaning on my network, and I utilized different people I knew, and it was the women's team coach at my university who had uh, he had a former teammate who was the assistant coach at a League of Ireland club over in Ireland, and then there was a girl on the women's team at Quinnipiac. Her family lived in that city, and so I went and stayed with her family for a week when I went on trial with this club in Derry in Ireland, who the assistant coach just knew the women's team coach at Quinnipiac. So it was this, I just started on this world of connections, and started chasing this idea of professional football as such, and relied on those connections.
Love it. Love it. Before we get into Derry, I want to circle back to you're getting set on the bench, and maybe it's warranted, maybe it's not. But do you look back at that setback and go, actually, I learned a lot about myself in that moment?
Yeah. And even more so now, as I am well removed from it.
Yep.
I held a little bit of anger and frustration even after I graduated, around that experience and just around the experience I had. But I kind of mentioned it earlier. I learned like full responsibility and utmost accountability, and I learned that you couldn't put the responsibility or blame on anyone else but yourself. Was I doing everything in my power? Was I behaving how I should have? Things like that. So to be put on the bench, yeah, there was potentially absolute validity. But then once I kind of took back control a little bit and took responsibility and just got stuck in and knew my value and knew my quality and just believed in myself, that kind of pushed me. And so that experience, and then looking back on it from afar now as well, has just taught me a heck of a lot around, yeah, that utmost accountability, responsibility of just taking
Yep.
full control of your situation, with everything that you can. And I can't, I'm not the coach. I can't make the decision, but I can train my hardest and give myself the greatest opportunity. But at the end of the day, if my best is not good enough for them, then like that's life. And so, yeah, it was a great lesson to learn. And but as I said, like being able to fight back and get my spot back gave me that belief and that confidence to go, yeah, why not go and try and
Yeah,
see how
totally.
far you can go.
But steps and tools. So now you also understand that, geez, if I have a setback, I can lean on what I've already done because it works. Control my controllables and and all of that stuff. And I think it's really interesting that if you study a lot of successful people, so many of them have had a major setback somewhere in their history that meant a hang of a lot to them that they had to then overcome. And I think that sticks with you and gives you a lot of those tools that do stick with you for life and take you through to success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by now I was developing a good level of like self-reflection and just being able to like take a step back a little bit and see the picture for what it was. But yeah, having setbacks is a massive one, and just having the tools to be able to manage them is the biggest one because we're all going to face them. You're not going to get out of this life scotch free.
Yep.
And especially if you're chasing a dream or chasing performance of some sorts, like no one's perfect. You're going to get knocked down, and so the earlier you can get knocked down and learn those skills, sometimes the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about to bring that up because we do live in a world where people chase comfort, I believe, and where a lot of our kids are either a big fish in a small pond, or they're put into pathways that do not stress them enough in certain ways. Um, and I think later on in life that has a really negative impact. And somewhere along the line, like you say, the earlier the better. Um, some setbacks can be incredibly powerful in a positive way for you.
Totally. And I think you touched on something there as well, like big fish, small pond. New Zealand's mighty small in the world of
Oh,
football,
yep,
mighty small.
yep,
And so if you if you can't handle being dropped to the bench for a reserve team game at under 23 level in the Northern League, but you think you can go and foot it over at Division One in the States, like it's not easy. We'll put it that way. And
yep,
so just yeah, being able to develop those skills and have a bit of humility because yeah, New Zealand, like without leaving New Zealand, you never know.
yep,
But once you do leave New Zealand, then you find out, and it humbles you pretty quickly, and you're one of millions. Whereas in New Zealand, you're one of maybe thousands type thing. So, but having those skills, as you say, being having setbacks and facing adversity as a child, as a teenager, um, is really valuable if you can learn the lessons, if you have the support to help
yep,
positively navigate it instead of just letting someone fail and then not giving them communication, not as a coach, not telling them this is why you're on the bench or not explaining things or things like that. So ensuring that there's still support around it, but let them
yep.
fail. Absolutely.
Yeah, and helping that them reflect upon why, right?
Yeah.
And what you can do in the next steps. Cool. So you head off to Ireland, Derry, and I guess for people who don't know Derry, it's probably not a big name out there in the world of football, but this is a team that is professional, and I mean they've made the Europa League, big competitions like this, haven't they?
Yeah. So the season I was there, that they qualified for Europa League the following season, sort of thing.
Yep.
So it was a pretty awesome environment to be in. But I think it's really like Derry. So Derry's actually in Northern Ireland, but they were the only Northern Irish team playing in the League of Ireland, which is the Republic of Ireland.
Yep.
There's a lot of history with Derry as well as a city. That's the city's gone through a lot of adversity and things like that. The Derry Wall and things. So like going to it was an awesome experience, but the club was built on so much more for so much like it's worth so much to people. And so that was really special. But yeah, I got the opportunity to go there on trial, and after 3 weeks, I'd played two friendly games, done pretty well in the friendly games. The manager brings me into the office and sits me down. He's like, well, "So what's your situation? You got a partner, you got a wife, like you got kids, like you got anything else?" I said, "I've got a suitcase and a dream, sort of thing." And so he was like, "Look, we're really interested in signing you, but we just got to figure out how to do this." And so that's when things got a little bit challenging or complicated. And I didn't have a European passport, um, and they'd never signed someone outside of the EU, so they didn't
Right.
necessarily know how to navigate the visa process for that. They tried different avenues, and so I kept on training and kept on hoping that something would come about. But then it got to about 6 or 7 weeks, and it was like, look, like, sorry, we can't figure it out. You can stay here as long as you want, and train with us while you look for a new opportunity, sort of thing. They housed me the whole time, so I lived with two of the boys when I was there, and so they took care of me in that sense. But yeah, it was a like you talk about professional. It was a proper environment. You're in from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. You're doing film, you're doing activation, you're training, you're going to lunch, and then you're going to the gym in the afternoon, things like that. And so that kind of that set the standard for me, I guess. It was really disappointing, obviously, not to sign,
Mm.
but I look back on it and I think it was the best thing for me, because if I'd signed straight out of uni, straight out of college, a pro contract at 22, my head would have just gone, and I would have probably lost some of that character that had got me there, that work, that hard work, or that
Yep.
humility and things like that. And so I look back on it, and it was a blessing in disguise that I didn't get signed, but it set the level that I was striving for in
Yep.
every other environment that I chased when I went around. It was like, I know the level that I want to be at. I'll behave in that way, whether my environment permits it or not, or like allows it or not. And so even if I wasn't in a professional team, I was still behaving in a professional way that I knew was the standard for me. And so that's what that experience did for me. And it was pretty important.
But again, having to step out of your comfort zone to go to the other side of the world, to a place you don't know, really important, right? Like if you don't take that step, you don't get those learnings.
No, not at all.
And so you go into this environment, you take away the standards with you. What do you do next?
Yeah, leaned on connections once again. So during my time at Derry, I'd connected with a former All Whites assistant coach at the time, and they'd put me in touch with good old Rory Fallon,
Yep.
who was he was a player assistant coach at a club in England. He's like, go see what you can do down there, sort of thing. And so I was like, cool. I'd spent 2 months in Ireland in that pro environment, and Rory was at a National League South club, so tier six, so one below the professional in England.
Yep.
And so I went down and stayed with Rory for a week and trialed, and they were like, yeah, like we'll take you. And Rory's like, yeah, just get this visa, sort of thing. And so I just looking back on it, it irks me because I could have gotten the same visa and gone back to Derry in Northern Ireland. It was just a working holiday visa for the UK,
Oh,
but I wouldn't have signed a pro contract in Ireland. I would have signed an amateur. And so
right.
you had to go to a country that had residency to obtain the visa. So I wasn't flying from England back to New Zealand. So I flew from England back to the States, applied for the visa on my New Zealand passport in the States, lived in America for a month, trained, did everything with the trust that I was going back to England to sign a contract, a amateur contract to play National League South for Truro City. So that was what I did next. And once I got back there, the agreement was that the club would provide housing. Um, the owner of the club owned the caravan park in Truro, and you can see where this is
Yeah,
going.
it's absolutely not quite housing.
And so, but that caravan wasn't available yet. So for the first like 5 or 6 weeks I was there, I had a friend from high school who we'd gone our separate ways after high school. This is 5 years later. He was living down the road in Falmouth, and he had a couch. And he was like, you can stay on my couch as long as you need, sort of thing.
Yep.
So I stayed on his couch, and then that created a 2 hour travel time to get to training and back from where I was staying for that first 5 or 6 weeks. 2 hours on public transport and off to training at 8 p.m., and then 2 hours on public transport back home. Um, and so I'd get home around midnight, and trains weren't running by that stage, so I had to go buses on the way home. And so I'd find myself in a bus station at 11 p.m. at night, foam rolling after training, waiting for the bus to come because there was only but one bus an hour. And
Yep.
so if you got there at the wrong time, so yeah, that was me. And I was in England playing football. A kid
Yep.
from Nelson, New Zealand, playing football in England was pretty cool. I would
Sweet.
say it wasn't the Premier League, but it was. I was playing football in England, National League South, traveling away games, everything like that. Playing in the FA Trophy, like yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I carried those standards because we only trained twice a week. So then it was like, well, you got 3 other days of the week to get your work in. So go to the gym, find a wall and take a ball,
Yep.
find other ways to train and things like that. And yeah, every night I'd come home to my caravan.
What's the most random wall you've ever had to find?
Some weren't walls, but yeah, there's a few different walls that I can visually see in my head of different places. There was one in Australia just under eucalyptus trees and stuff like that. But yeah, you make do with what you can find.
It's paying the price, right? Like it's what it
It
takes if
was,
you're chasing your dream.
yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to: is how willing was I to chase the dream, and what was I willing to do? I was willing to take public transport for 2 hours, train for 2 hours, and then take public transport home again, get home at midnight, stay on a couch, stay in a caravan. And these are only a few of the multiple experiences that I've had along the way.
Yeah, because you've played in a multitude of countries, haven't you?
Yeah, I think 6 or 7 countries by the end of it all.
Yep. And so you're doing this again and again and again. There obviously becomes a time when you go, maybe I'm not going to make it where I want to make it. Do you start redefining success and your pathway at that stage?
Yeah, so I chased this idea of professional football, and it was like the idea was like really big leagues, national team, this, that, and the other. And it didn't quite come about, but I was chasing something. And so I think it was my 25th birthday, I sat down after I'd called the guy who I'd gotten psych help from when I was 13, had given me an exercise to do. And I went up and sat at a cafe on my 25th birthday and just did this massive self reflection session. What are my values? What's important to me? Like, what's my mission statement? And then I also looked at like, well, why am I playing football, and what are my values around football and things like that. And so I was able to just reshape why I was playing the game. And I was like, prior to it, I'd been chasing this idea. And then once I sat down and did that, I then had this clarity of why I'm playing the game. It was to like travel the world and have these experiences. It was to meet new people and develop connections. But it was also to explore how good I could become and what my potential was within the sport as well. I still had that.
Yep.
That's always there. But football became so much more to me than just trying to play on big teams and in big leagues. It was how good can I become, but also like who am I going to meet? Where am I going to go? What experiences am I going to have, sort of thing. And when I kind of reshaped that and reframed my journey at 25, I then had another 5 or 6 years of this incredible journey where I wasn't chasing anymore. I was like, opportunity, let's go. Opportunity, let's go. Like, let's see what happens.
Is
Like,
that
who
was that
knows?
more enjoyable? Was it more enjoyable for you, or was it just different?
I would say I enjoyed it a lot more.
Yep.
I was able to embrace the communities I was in and explore the communities. I didn't just bungle myself up and be like, I have to do this. I can't go out and enjoy myself because I'm chasing this. I'm chasing this. So like when I was in England and Ireland, I was chasing and chasing. So I didn't really enjoy as much as I should have. Like I didn't even go up to London. Never went to a Premier League game. So when I reframed it all, I got to enjoy places a lot more. I got out in nature. I connected with the community. I did all this stuff that brought me a lot more enjoyment to the journey. And all of this was external to football, but it also allowed me to be better when it came to the football because I could just focus on the football when it was happening. And then, cool, what am I up to this afternoon? I'm going up this river to see this waterfall with a couple of my teammates, or I'm going to meet with these fans from the club because they want to put on a dinner for you or something like that. So yeah, when I was able to do that reflection, I reframed this whole picture that I had for my journey as such.
That's really interesting. Do you find in those places that you form stronger connections with the community that they're still there? And I guess where I'm coming from is that you have a career, and if you're focused on your soccer, your career stops. You're going to have those memories of great games and your teammates and stuff, but if you've formed bonds and connections with different communities, that's there forever. And I'm just interested as to when you made that mind shift, do you have stronger connections in those places as compared to, say, your dairies and some of those first clubs you went to when you really were just chasing that football dream?
Yeah, I'd say so. Chasing the game and jumping from team to team, you only ever kind of collected one or two teammates along the way. Like you connected with one or two and then you collected them, and so you've got them for life sort of thing. But yeah, when I expanded to the greater community, um, it it made that journey more impactful. But it also, like, yeah, as you say, they're still with me, and I've been able to go back and visit like certain fans. There was at a club in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The fans paid for the team to go whitewater rafting on one of the most famous rivers in Tennessee because they wanted us to experience what Chattanooga was really like,
Wow.
sort of thing. And so, like, crazy story, and this is going to time mark this podcast, but fast forward to today, and the chairman of my club in Chattanooga is now the mayor of Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is hosting Auckland City at the Club World Cup
Ah,
while they're there. And so I've connected with my old chairman of the club saying, hey, team from New Zealand's coming to Chattanooga, and they're like, and so they're taking care of them. So I'm really like excited for Auckland City and my friends at
brilliant.
Auckland City to experience Chattanooga. So I think that just goes to show the power of it all. Um, Along the way, I've collected coaches and different things like that as well, and friends, and I update my database every year with how my life is going, and so I do it. I'm pretty deliberate and intentional with keeping those people that I've met along the way up to date with what's going on in my life and things like that. So, yeah, there's been some pretty awesome experiences and some pretty cool places, and you like whether it's the fans, whether it's the wider staff in the office, or whether it's just a local family that you might have ended up coaching their kid or something like that. Like
Yeah,
that that does stay longer. Of course, I'll always be able to say I played with this person, I played with that person. They can say the same thing, but like, I might not see that person for 20 years. Most people I've played with, I might never see again. So it's yeah, keeping hold of those ones that you did create a strong bond with, but then keeping hold of those memories from outside of it is really important too.
magic. Love it. And so at some stage, you come home and you transition into performance coaching. You've obviously just listening to you, you've got this amazing experiences in different environments and high performance. But what inspires this move?
Yeah, there's different pieces to this one. First started exploring it in 2018. Obviously, I studied psychology when I went to university in the States, but that didn't lead to like an undergraduate degree in psychology doesn't really lead to much. And so one of the things that came from that 25th birthday kind of exploration of myself was to find other things outside of football in my life to commit time to. Like you have a lot of time as a pro footballer, to be honest, like 8 till 3, but then you've got from 3 p.m. until 8, 9 p.m. at night. Like you've got 4 hours a day to invest in something.
Yeah.
And so I started investing my time in something that I was interested in. And so when I played for Southern United in the old National League down in Dunedin back in 2018, and I started connecting with sports psychologists at the university. And I met one, and he gave me three names. I met those three. They each gave me three names. There was now 9 on my list. Like, so
Yeah.
connections again, right? Like, whether it's in football or out of football. So I just started meeting these people who were in positions that I thought I'd like to be in the long run. They were the sports psychologists for the Otago Volts cricket team or the Southern Steel netball team, or they were a personal development manager for the Highlanders. And so I started just learning about this space and what opportunities there were. And over the years, and I didn't travel, I still traveled. I went back overseas again and things like that. And I started just, I had a mentor, and he was just like, test it. use young people as guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, actually, was the first time I sat down and wrote like a program, and I wrote like a 6 session program around personal development. And so it was just like, here's 6 different steps that you can take to develop around values and self-awareness and understanding control and goal setting and this, that, and the other, understanding your circle and all that. And so I just started with one, and then I had a mentor like pick it apart and challenge it, and I then just started shaping these different kind of programs and started testing them on young or younger kids as such at different academies and things like that. And so it's kind of snowballed into this bigger thing that where it is now. But that's kind of where it all started, was this just curiosity of that space and what I could be doing post football. And as you say, like I had all these experiences that I wanted to share what I'd learned alongside a bit of a formal education in psychology. I mixed those two together, and I would say I've got a really unique perspective on what the world of youth sport and pro sports and just a journey or a career in sport could look like, and what you could kind of deal with along the way. And so, yeah, I'm in a pretty cool position now to have all that behind me.
100%. You've got the education side, but you've walked the talk. And I think that's incredibly important to have those experiences and be able to speak to that. But I also think that, the journey you took is probably more likely to happen for most people with a dream to be professional sports people than actually making a big league and things like that. The percentages are sort of like 0.2% or something like that, you know. And so bringing that different perspective of how to use sport to experience life and still push yourself as hard as you can, and I guess maximize your own potential is absolutely brilliant. So your business is called Panzer Performance. What's your mission there?
That's a big one. But yeah, just back to what you just said is I often think of my journey as the outliers journey, but then you've reframed it as the more likely journey if you are
Yeah, I like.
chasing it. And so I absolutely agree, because there is a very low percentage that do make it, but if you still go for it, you're going to have this incredible experience. But too many people just don't go for it now because they didn't make that make that headline journey that they wanted to, sort of thing. So yeah, it's I'm passionate about using football as a vehicle to see the world, to have experiences, to grow and develop, and or just using sport, not just football, but using sport to develop as a person, explore the world. And yeah, we see the Olympians and we see the professionals that travel in all these other elaborate places, but that's not saying that you can't do it. You might not get paid as much, you might not get as much visibility, but you can still have all of these experiences and do all these cool things and meet all these incredible people using your sport if you're willing to. So I just wanted to touch on that. But yeah,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that's
I
something
think
that,
like, you get to 30, maybe mid 30s if you're lucky, and your career ends. But if you've worked all that time to maximize yourself and have these experiences for the next 50 years, you can put that into practice. And you look at the stats around people in high performing jobs, um, working at high levels in business, education, whatever that may be, the percentage of those who played decent to high level sport is above and beyond, you know? So it definitely has a huge effect on people who push themselves to go further.
you're a more attractive employee, you're a more attractive committee member because of the things that you've had to do to be successful
Mm.
in sport, like that discipline that we talked about, packing my bag the night before, 3 different bags, being organized, all
Yep.
of that. And so, yeah, you're in a much better position because of sport with all those different skills and things that you've built up. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Fitting into a team,
yeah, being
playing
able
your
to work
role.
with other people,
Yep.
totally. So yeah, this is all stuff that I end up talking to people about, I guess.
Brilliant.
Um, and I use all of the different experiences that I've had, my perspective, the psychological education that I've got, the experience that I've got into Panzer Performance, and I guess my mission is to help individuals explore their potential. Right? I think humans have this infinite potential, and so I'm in a position to help individuals explore their own potential in whatever circumstances they're in. And that's through helping them understand themselves more on a deeper level, understanding what's important to them, understanding why they behave in a certain way, and things like that. So,
I love it, and I love it, and it fits right in with what we're trying to do here. 100%. What are what are some of the common challenges that you find these youth athletes have?
yeah, I mean, today's world has changed a lot from when I was a teenager, from when you were potentially a teenager as
Oh, it was
well,
a long time ago.
with the digital kind of the digital growth.
Yeah,
Um, And so understanding that is a big challenge for people who are removed from it. But I think a lot of youth struggle with identity and clarity and identity and who they are because they constantly are consuming all this information and all these things online of what they're expected to be or who they're expected to be or where they're expected to be. And so that then can lead to all this comparison. And I think comparison is a huge challenge for youth
massive.
athletes, whether it's within their own training group or with across the world. Like if we're to look at football, like yeah, it's amazing what Lamine Yamal's doing, and he's only 16. Like it's amazing, but it's absolutely ruining the idea of development and what like the perspective of some young kids in New Zealand think that they can be sort of thing. And so it's like that's a massive challenge because they're like, well, why am I
Totally.
not there? But it's really important to understand that you're a makeup of all the experiences that you've been in your life, and your situation is completely different. So comparison is like it's the hardest thing to overcome for a teenager, but every other teenager has been in a different experience, different environment, different given different opportunities, born to different parents, and like gone to a different school. So it's unfair on you as an individual to compare yourself to someone else in a completely different situation, even though the only thing that is the same is their age as such. Um,
Totally. We have a newsletter that comes out every Friday on different aspects. And I think 2 weeks ago, it was on comparison. We called it the comparison track, and it's absolutely huge. It's been really neat, actually. Belinda, who's not here tonight, her son, um, read it and took lots away from it. And in the weekend, Belinda's there on the sideline, and Belinda's loud on the sideline, like really, really positive, but really loud. And she compared him to someone else on the field, and he stopped and he turned around and said, "We're not doing that, Mum. We're not comparing players. I'm not Owen. I'm Will." And she went, "Oh, just a reminder." But so cool that he could take that and is now just focused on himself. And I'm this person, and tomorrow I'm going to be try and be slightly better than I was today, and the next day I'm going to try and be slightly better than I am. And that's all I can control and all I can focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, the comparison piece is a massive one, and just understanding themselves and their context, their experience, their situation. I think confidence and motivation is an off, like that off, that comes off of that comparison piece, because they might lose confidence or motivation if someone else gets an opportunity but you don't.
Yep.
And so if I look back on my own experience, I'm very glad that I didn't. But when I was 15, 16 and not getting selected for the regional teams and things like that, it didn't really knock me down. I just worked harder and they got the opportunity. I didn't, their circumstance was different. Mine was as well. And so just being able to take everything for what it is in your own circumstance. And yeah,
Mm.
the confidence piece kind of stems from that comparison, but it also, like, strong confidence stems from identity and understanding who you are and what's important to you and why you're doing it as well. And so that's a big part. So I do a fair amount of confidence and motivation. But then also the other one that I see a little bit about is like the high pressure and expectation. And and so in today's world, the pressure to perform is a lot more because there's cameras on, and once everything's filmed, then it's like, well, you're only one clip away from being in a big league or something like that. Someone's seeing you and you're getting an opportunity. So there's this higher pressure and expectation
Yep.
to perform, whether it's from the self, parents, coaches, or society. It's just there. And so then how can I help manage that pressure expectation that these young people are going through as well? So there's a few different ones that are going on that I see a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to touch on something you just mentioned around coaches and parents and their role in all of this because it's one of the reasons we started the podcast and doing what we do is because you can see the effect it has on young people when it goes wrong.
Mhm.
So what do you see the role of coaches and parents as being?
Um, a lot of different things. I think one of the biggest ones is just being a supporter and like helping guide, but letting the individual kind of lead their own path as such.
Yep.
So it's, yeah, providing opportunities for individuals to explore themselves within a sporting context. Can we provide it as a coach? Can we provide an environment where this individual is able to express who they are as a person and as an athlete, and see how good they can become through the environment that you're creating, sort of thing. And so it's, yeah, it's being very clear on the environment you're trying to offer to these people. I think communication is really important, and so being able to communicate effectively as well is really important for both parents and coaches. But language plays a huge role into what these kids hold on to
Mm.
as well.
I remember you saying somewhere, one of the times we've talked, the words you use as a coach, but also as a parent with your own kids, are incredibly powerful. And sometimes you don't realize what words you've used.
Yeah. So like that example you just brought up of Belinda and her son before, that's powerful, right? Like, and if you look at it from another perspective, there might be another parent on the sideline just yelling and screaming or whatever,
Yep.
and they don't, if they don't have a positive or a conversation with their kid after the game, or the kid isn't able to say, "Hey, mum, I don't like how you talk on the sideline. Like, that doesn't help me perform," sort of thing. And a kid is probably not going to say that to a parent because they're scared. And
Yep.
so, like, just understanding, like, who am I in the role? to help this child, and what do they need from me? And that's potentially having a conversation with them about, okay, well, hey, son, daughter, whatever, what do you want from me as a parent supporting you on the sideline? What do you want from
Great
me as a
question.
parent um, after the game in the car ride home? Do you want a green, yellow, red system? So if it's been a red day, you say you get in the car and say, I'm red. Red's like, let's talk about ice cream, let's talk about school, let's talk about, or let's just play Taylor Swift in the car ride home. If it's orange, it's like, I'm maybe willing to talk, but not really. Let's just wait. Or if it's green, it's like, cool, then it's always open. So like being able to navigate those conversations on like what does the athlete or the child need from you, and then the same with coaches. Like coaches need. There's this idea as a coach, you've got a responsibility, but as the athlete, you might have a different perspective of what the coach needs to do for you. So having that conversation as coach athlete and understanding like why are you here as an athlete, what's driving you to be here, so the coach can then feed into that. They can really lean on that purpose. And the same goes for a coach. Why is the coach there? So the athlete can understand, well, he's showing up to do this because he cares about us, or that she's showing up to do this because she's trying to take the next step in her coaching career. So just having that dialogue with the athlete and the parents, the coaches, the managers, just to understand where everyone's at in that situation is really powerful.
I love that because you see a lot of advice out there. Advice like, are you the parent of an athlete? On the journey home in the car, say this, you know? But coming at it from a completely different perspective, every single individual is different, has different needs, and even each individual, like you're saying, has different needs. Talking about, say, the journey home in the car, sometimes my boy wants to talk about the game for an hour on our drive home. Sometimes he wants silence. Sometimes he just wants an ice cream and something to eat. Sometimes he wants to play music. And when he's ready to talk, he'll stop the music and that. And they just need different things at different times. And I love how you bring it right back to what does the player need? Talk to them, build that relationship, build that trust.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Love
And
that.
a big way that you can kind of understand that, like, and that I work with youth a lot around is like, why are you playing the sport?
Yep.
Why do you invest so much time and energy into it? And so when a parent can understand why their child is spending all this time doing it, then the parent can be more constructive in the conversation when they do have the conversation after a game, or if things aren't going too well, or if someone's getting upset. And it's the same with the coach. If the coach understands why a player is there, then the coach can feed into that and contribute to that and help support them along their journey as well. And so a lot of this, there is responsibility on the individual athlete to understand, like, why am I doing this? Why am I spending so much time in this sport? And who am I trying to be? Because then you've got people that will support you around it. And so, yeah, there is that responsibility on the individual. But then once that's established, then it's really important for effective communication from the people around them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, look, well, mate, we are coming to the end of this. We've been chatting for a long time now. I'd love to finish just with, before we get into we have our game changer for our last few questions. I'd love to just dive into what your future sort of aspirations are around Panzer Performance, where that sort of career is going to head for you.
Yeah, so um, the idea, like I started a website when I first graduated, thanks to a professor who said, start a brand for yourself. You never know where you're going to end up. And so I had that website, and then I've only just recently redone it for the first time in 10 years, which
Yep,
is really
looks really good
exciting.
too. Yep.
Thank you. And so I guess, but then over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with youth athletes around New Zealand and around the world, actually, to just help them in their journeys, to support them in their journeys and things like that. And so Panzer Performance all about is all about that. Um, Panzer Performance isn't may not be a long-term thing, because my ultimate goal is to head down clinical psychology pathway and become a clinical psychologist, and so impact hopefully youth and adolescents in New Zealand in that way. Um, Aotearoa's in a bit of a mental health crisis, to be honest. A lot of our youth, especially. But I also see sport as a great medium to impact the mental health of our youth as well. And so, while I am using Panzer Performance now, potentially once I hopefully become a clinical psychologist in 3 or 4 years' time, um, I hope to always be able to impact youth, and the impact might shift from what I do now to a more mental health lens. But yeah, I guess long term is me working with people in New Zealand, and helping improve their function in life wherever they're at in their journey, whether that's athletes, whether that's everyday people, whether that's people that have sadly begun on the back foot, whatever it may be. But Panzer Performance is always going to be there, and right now it's what I'm doing, it's what I love, and it's filling a void that there's a big void in New Zealand for, because sadly our qualified sports psychologists, there's only enough to cater towards all the elite sports teams, and there's a lot of young athletes that are missing out on the support. And but I'm very grateful to have mentors who are already clinical psychologists for sports teams in New Zealand, and I align a lot of my work with some of the stuff that they're doing, so that these young people that I'm working with are prepared if they do make it into high performance environments, that say they progress from working with me as a teenager at high school and they make it into the Black Ferns national rugby team. They're in a position where they've got foundations already,
Yep.
and they can fit right into that mold. So yeah, there is like Panzer Performance is really important. Longer term, that might get put to the side as I look to impact the mental health of young people in New Zealand, in another way as such. But yeah, it's always going to be there.
Brilliant. And so needed. Um, there's just not enough, like you said, at these youth ages. I love how you bring sport into it, because sport for me is just a microcosm of life. Whether it's a 90 minutes, whether it's a race, whether it's a competition, you feel life in a lot of its moments within sport. And I think it can be a really positive way to help people overcome those difficulties that you're having. So I think you're completely right with that, and I hope you never lost to sport. And I guess the way you've spoken about sport for the last hour and a half, I doubt that's ever going to happen. I do hope you do better than David Galbraith at getting into clinical psychology. We had him on, and he said he went to the board 15 times before they let him in.
Yeah, so I'm 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 one unsuccessful so far. So I'll go again in a couple months' time here. I got very close, but yeah, not close enough, sadly. But yeah, hopefully I don't break DG's record. But the DG is an incredible person, and
Absolutely.
you talk about setbacks, that just shaped who he became, sort of thing. So yeah, sports a as I say, a vehicle to explore the individual and the person, but also just youth in New Zealand. I don't know what the percentage of young people in New Zealand is that plays organized sport or even casual sport, but it's high. So if we can create more mentally healthy sporting organizations at a youth level, we're going to impact the mental health of young people earlier in a lot more places through sport as well. And so there is definitely that idea as well.
Yeah, and I think like uh, teenagers especially really care about sport. Those ones who are playing, And if you have someone like yourself attached to that sport who come in and speak to them, they really listen to you. And I remember you saying something to me when we spoke earlier. You said something along the lines of, all I'm doing is telling these kids exactly what their parents have been telling them for 4 or 5 years. But because I'm someone different, they listen to me.
Mhm. Yep.
So we need
Yeah,
more of you.
it's I'd say it's fairly accurate because I was probably the same as a teenager. You get the same message from your mum and your dad all the time, or your uncle, your auntie, or whoever, but then because it's so repetitive,
Yeah,
you it becomes dulled down. But then when it's someone outside of that kind of circle that you might look up to, or that's been somewhere and that's done something, and they say the exact same thing, you hold on to it. And so that's one of the powers of, or like a point of difference for me, is that I'm still young enough that these teenagers can relate to me to an extent. I've been through that journey, and so I do have teenagers that do trust in me and really
yeah,
buy into the work I'm doing, and I've had some pretty cool experiences seeing where they've kind of gotten themselves to, sort of thing. But yeah, oftentimes it is just similar messaging that parents would be giving their children, but I just give it from a different voice.
yeah, totally. And I think as parents, we all wish for someone, a mentor like yourself, with those experiences, with your educational background, to work with our kids because they do get to a point where it's not that they don't listen to you, but they listen to you a lot less than they did when they were 4 or 5. And they need that mentor. And I think that's come through in chats we've had with multiple other people that mentor person is so key. Um, we're nearly done, mate.
It's
Are
all
you
good.
ready for the game changer four quick questions before we get
Let's
out of here?
go. Let's
All
go.
right. Parents of youth athletes. What's one do and one don't for them?
Yeah, so I touched upon this earlier a little bit, but like let your kids fail. As a parent, let your kids fail, but be there to support them when they do. I think that's really important. Is you can let them fail, but you're still there to help navigate that journey of adversity with them. It's not just letting them fail with no support structures. So that's what I would encourage parents to do is let your kids fail, but support them. And then what I would encourage parents not to do is to not live your athletic dreams through your children.
Yeah,
Um, I think that maybe not as much in New Zealand, but in other environments I've lived in, it can really ruin the child's experience. And so, if yeah, it's your child's experience, not yours,
yeah,
and so don't kind of ruin it for them.
yeah. Really good advice. And look, you see it here in New Zealand all the time. I don't think we're really any different. We might maybe not verbalize it in public as much as other countries, but I think it's still there, especially in private,
Mm.
um, for sure. Just touching on your do for parents around failure. When that happens, do you have a particular way that works to frame that failure for the kids?
Not necessarily, because it all like adversity might look different in one family to another, right? Like
Yep.
depending on your circumstances, adversity can look vastly different. I think it would just be like seeing exploring the lessons that could be learned from that, rather than just being like I wouldn't I like you don't to me it's never failure, but it's like what did we learn from this situation, or what did you learn from this, and how could you kind of be better moving forward, sort of thing.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so what about the youth athlete themselves? What's a do and a don't for the youth athletes out there?
Yeah, so I would encourage youth athletes to ask yourself why you're pursuing what you're pursuing, and why it's important to you. So whether it's you're pursuing sport, music, study, plumbing, whatever, understand or ask yourself why you're pursuing it, and then ask why it's important to you. And so having that just gives you a deeper sense of connection to it. It gives you a deeper kind of motivation to keep going with it when times do get hard, because it would ideally be something that's important to you.
Brilliant.
And then I'd say don't let other people or society define success for you. And so, yeah, I spoke about that a little bit as well. But in a world full of comparisons, understand that every single individual in this world is different, and their situation is different, their environment is different, their opportunities are different. So, do your best not to let other people or society define success for you.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, brilliant. So, what's one book, one resource, one tool, not allowed to be yours, that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, I don't have a book just yet, but potentially someday, hopefully. Um, a book that has had significant impact on me and plenty of other people that I know. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Incredible book around controlling the controllables as such when everything else is out of your control. Um, how can you control your mind and your actions and things like that? So that's a really big one, whether you're a parent or an athlete or a coach. That just helps you understand yourself better. Another one for athletes that I would encourage is it's called Mind Gym by Gary Mack.
Yep.
It was that was something I read when I was probably in my teenage years, and it just opened my world to this mental skills, the mental skills that are required from top athletes, sort of thing. So that had a big impact on me as a young athlete. And then for parents, I would encourage you to read The Power of Full Engagement by Jim Lower. Hopefully I
Okay.
pronounced his last name right, but The Power of Full Engagement. It's incredible in all sorts of ways around just being fully present, being fully engaged, and that will ideally allow you to be a better parent for your children, and supporting them, but also be a better person for yourself to live a better life too. So the power of full engagement.
Love those. I've read the first two, and I haven't even heard of the last one, so it's definitely going on the list. And yeah, Frankel's work really, really important work, and we do a lot of work with Stephen Covey in the Seven Habits of Effective People, and really influenced by a lot of that sort of stuff and that circle of control. So important for our youngsters to know and understand. Last question. This is where you can rave on about your stuff. Where can people who I'm sure if they've listened to the last hour and a half around your journey, your experiences, what you're doing with youth, where can they find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so really exciting. You can find me on my new website. It's called panzerperformance.nz. So that's where you can find everything about the work I do with Panzer Performance, but you can also read up on my football career and watch some highlights. You can see some of the videos of speaking engagements that I've done, and you can also read some blogs that I've written. It's kind of cool. I wrote a lot of blogs early on in the journey, and I'm remaking them now as such. I wrote a blog back in 2017, I think, called The 12 Lessons Learned While Chasing My Dreams.
Oh
And I've
wow.
kind of remastered that as such, remade it, and just most of the lessons are exactly the same. I've just added a little bit more to them. And so, yeah, the website's got everything that you can find, and you can also contact me through the website. So that's panzerperformance.nz is the website. I've also started a business Instagram page. It's at panzerperformance.nz. And so you can find me on Instagram as well. And then my email is just eric@panzerperformance.nz. Just make sure it's Eric with a K. And so that will end up in my inbox and not someone else's.
Not the other Eric.
Yeah.
And look, you work with individuals, you work with teams, you work with academies. Have I missed anybody off there? Are you working with schools or anything like that?
Yeah, schools as well. Like I'm open to most as such. I've worked with school teams, academy teams, university teams, individuals, organizations, work with some businesses and things like that. So just a whole variety of, I guess, if you're part of a organization, team, school, whatever, and you're just looking to improve the well-being and performance of your people, that's where I kind of come into play. And I'm heavily youth focused, but not necessarily only youth focused. The skills all translate, and so yeah, it's wherever whoever is interested and willing. That's the most important part, is working with people who are willing to engage and want to improve themselves or their group of people is a big piece as well.
Fantastic, mate. Hey, I've absolutely loved listening to you about your journey. Just enthralling, and to hear about what you're doing now for our youth, creating healthy humans in our country, which is just, I don't think there's anything more important. I'm going to grab you at some stage and introduce you to my 14-year-old and my 16-year-old. I might lock you in a room with them for an afternoon or something like that. But thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for creating a platform for one, for parents and coaches and people to learn and understand more, and two, for people like myself to share, to hopefully help or inspire others. So yeah, really appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to seeing where things go in your journey as well with the podcast.
Absolutely. And I should mention, we're going to be working with Erik again. What we'd love to do is bring little snippets, little bites of really important information. We might take a topic like motivation, like confidence, certain things like that, and just give you 10 to 15 minutes, dive deeper into those topics. You can listen to them nice and quickly in between doing something, and then use some of that information with your kids, with your athletes that you're coaching or looking after. And so that'll be coming to you soon.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Cheers.
Cheers.